Welcome to Straight Up Sports, the podcast, episode 2. Yep, we're going to talk football again. It's that time of the year, unfortunately, where football dominates the sporting world. The divisional playoff rounds were this weekend, and we'll discuss the coaching carousel. I'll throw in a little NBA and a little NHL for my New York local people who are listening, because I know everybody wants to talk about the Knicks and the Rangers and how they're probably going to fail to meet expectations at the end, because New York fans are absolutely ludicrous. So let's get started. The NFL Divisional Playoffs were this weekend, and it was a crazy ride. We'll start in Baltimore, where the Ravens hosted the Texans. Lamar Jackson did his thing in the second half, and the Ravens found a way to beat Houston. But Houston has nothing to be ashamed of. C.J. Stroud is going to win Rookie of the Year, and DeMeco Ryans is going to win Coach of the Year. The question is, will Houston take a step back next year? Remember, second-year quarterbacks tend to do this. I still think Stroud's going to be a hell of a player for years to come, but he might struggle next year. So if you're Houston, you have to be aggressive in the offseason. You have to be able to go get receivers. We know there's going to be some available. Justin Jefferson could become available, wants a new contract, but the Vikings haven't given him one yet. Stephon Diggs, we'll talk about him in a little bit with what happened in Buffalo, but he could be available. Nico Collins is a nice player, but he's not a number one receiver, in my opinion. They probably need an upgrade at running back, too. Yes, Pierce and Singletary are nice backs, but they're more complimentary. Do they go out and maybe get Derrick Henry, or do they ask the Giants for Saquon Barkley? We'll see, but in order for Houston to take that next step, they have to upgrade in talent. But they have such a bright future, they hired the right coach and the right quarterback and got it right. As for the Ravens, they advanced to the AFC Championship game. Lamar Jackson is validating his MVP. Going to be his second one of his young career. And now he's got a chance to go to the Super Bowl for the first time. Something that him and Josh Allen both were trying to do. And Josh Allen, unfortunately, was eliminated, and we'll get to that in a minute. Give Baltimore credit. It was a tight first half. They looked rusty, a little slow. Remember, they had off 2 weeks. They were off a bye, and then the week before, they didn't play anyone against Pittsburgh, which allowed the Steelers to get in. So, the Ravens, they figured it out in the second half. Give them credit. Isaiah Likely scored a touchdown, and Lamar scored 2 on his own, and the Ravens are now in the AFC title game. They are absolutely the favorite to win the Super Bowl, and they should. They have a Super Bowl winning coach in John Harbaugh, and a quarterback that could potentially do some damage in Lamar Jackson. They have a great defense led by Roquan Smith, who has been an absolute beast at linebacker, and Kyle Hamilton is one of the better safeties in the sport. To me, it's really simple. If the Ravens can run the ball, they're going to win it. They were one of the best, if not the best, rushing team in the sport. If they can dominate the line of scrimmage, it's over. With that quarterback, his ability to move, and his arm is completely underrated now. It used to be a detriment, now it's an asset. Let's go to the Saturday night game between the Niners and the Packers. San Francisco probably shouldn't have won this game. But Jordan Love tried to play hero at the end with a cross-field, cross-the-body throw. Not a good decision. And Greenlaw made a hell of a play, and the Niners ended up advancing. The weather was an issue. It poured. And Brock Purdy was struggling with the ball. You could tell he was trying the glove. It didn't work. And he was also playing without the glove. The glove was an issue. But Brock Purdy on that last drive figured it out, getting the ball to Chris Conley, getting the ball to George Kittle, and handing it off to Christian McCaffrey gave the Niners the edge to survive Green Bay. Again, same thing as Baltimore. I expected San Francisco to come out slow in the first half. They were slow. They looked rusty. It was a pretty low-scoring game. But then McCaffrey got going, and the loss of Deebo Samuel really hurt this team because he's a kind of a scatter back that can do everything. He can run, he can catch. Heck, he could probably even throw. But now they may be without him next week, and he's 50-50 to go with a shoulder injury. The way he runs and plays, the likelihood is even if he plays, he probably won't be that effective. That is a huge loss for their offense, and it puts that much more pressure on Brock Purdy to execute without him. He's going to have to rely more on Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle to get him success. As for Green Bay, it was a hell of a year. Jordan Love is the franchise quarterback moving forward, something I thought I'd never say. But Green Bay is very good at this. They give up their franchise quarterback, and their old franchise quarterback ends up on the Jets. So I guess we'll see Jordan Love in 12 years in a Jet uniform. But Green Bay has a lot of offensive talent. Their receivers are really good. Their running game was solid this year, but Aaron Jones has been injured a lot. You have to wonder if they want to go a different route there. Their defense showed up the last few games, and Matt LaFleur is a heck of a coach who doesn't know how to manage games to save his life. But most coaches under the age of 60 don't know how to manage games. I don't understand why coaches don't hire game managing employees. Hire an employee just to manage the game. You call the plays and you call the shots. Green Bay overachieved, and Matt LaFleur deserves a lot of credit. He probably saved his job this year by going to the playoffs. As for the Niners, they advance. Now they play Detroit in the NFC title game. They're going to host and have a chance to go back to the Super Bowl, where they lost to Kansas City and they lost to Baltimore a few years back. San Francisco wants revenge, but the reality is, without Deebo Samuel, it gets that much tougher. Yes, they're fortunate Dallas lost early, and yes, the NFC is very weak in terms of quarterback personnel. It's not great. The door is open for San Francisco to get there, and according to the color theory, they're going to make it. For those of you that don't know what that is, the NFL logo the last 2 years has had the Super Bowl logo, has had the colors of the two teams in it weeks prior to the Super Bowl. This year it's purple and red, which would mean it's Baltimore-San Francisco, a rematch of the Beyonce game. Now let's go to Sunday's games, Detroit and Tampa, a game that I thought honestly wasn't going to be that competitive. But I give Tampa a lot of credit. Baker Mayfield is in a contract year. Like I said on the last episode, I wouldn't give him more than 1 year. He reminds me a lot of Geno Smith. He does great in a contract year, and then he regresses. Maybe not as far as people think he's going to regress, but he'll regress. Mike Evans is a free agent after the year, and you have to wonder if he actually believes that Baker Mayfield can win him a Super Bowl. My gut tells me he leaves and goes to a competitive team like Kansas City. Could you imagine Mike Evans in Kansas City with Mahomes? It would be unfair. As for the Bucs, like I said, they've had a great year. Baker's been great. Their one issue this year was running the football. They struggled there. I wonder if they make a change there at running back. Their defense had some Super Bowl winners in Devin White and Antoine Winfield. Todd Bowles only knows one side of the ball. That's the defense. He knows nothing about offense and nothing about managing a game. Give Dave Canales, their offensive coordinator, credit. He's a guy that probably should get interviewed for head coaching jobs, but he probably won't get it because the carousel is too strong this year. But next year, you want to be on the market when teams like Buffalo, Dallas, and Philly end up firing their coaches. And then there's Detroit, a city that's been rooting for this team a long time, a city that seems united by Dan Campbell and Jared Goff. And now the Lions are 1 win away from going to a Super Bowl. They have more NFC title appearances than Dallas since 1995. And we'll get to Dallas because I'm going to get there with the coaching discussion with Mike McCarthy. But the reality is simple. Detroit is 1 win away. I didn't think anyone would be saying that even 4 or 5 years ago. Remember, this team went 0-16 a while ago. And now they added Dan Campbell. They added Jared Goff. Their running game is special with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and they even added Zach Ertz to their roster today after a tight end injury. The one question I have in Detroit is their defense. Their secondary got torched by Baker Mayfield. Imagine what's going to happen with Brock Purdy. That's the main concern for me. I think the Niners will beat Detroit and go to the Super Bowl just because Detroit's secondary isn't good enough. But for Dan Campbell, this is a hell of a year. But next year, they need to get to the Super Bowl or at least back to the NFC title game, or it could be an issue. Then we'll get to the game everyone's been talking about, the Chiefs and the Bills. Everybody thought Josh Allen and Buffalo, it was set up for them. Home game against a weaker Mahomes team. But it was Mahomes' first road game, and he loves playing the villain role. Don't count out the greatness of Mahomes. And he did it again. Kelsey scores 2 touchdowns. Pacheco ran as hard as anyone as I've ever seen. And Buffalo missed their opportunities. People can blame Josh Allen all they want, but at the end of the day, this was a team loss. Their defense was banged up. Okay, banged up. A lot of their starters were hurt. That's the nature of the sport this time of year. Josh Allen missed a throw on, I believe it was 2nd and 9 or 3rd and 9 in the fourth quarter. He had Stephon Diggs underneath, went for the home run ball for Shakir, and threw it 10 yards short. All he had to do was throw the underneath route. Diggs would have had a first down, and Buffalo still could have kept moving. Instead, they didn't execute. Stephon Diggs dropped an 80-yard a seed, by Josh Allen. And in about 6 weeks' time, we'll be hearing a trade request from Stephon Diggs complaining about something, because he did in Minnesota and he will in Buffalo. And guess what? If I'm a team, I wouldn't touch him. The fact that he dropped that ball and he's going to place the blame game, and the fact that he didn't even talk to the media after the game shows his immaturity. Guess what? You're an NFL player. Your obligation is to meet with the media after the game. They have a job too, just like you do. You don't fulfill that, I would have suspended him and I would have thrown him off the team. That's an old school way of thinking about it, but the guy has issues. I wouldn't touch him. But of course, because of his talent, someone's going to take the chance, likely the New York Giants, because of Brian Daboll's connection with Stephon Diggs as well as their GM, Joe Schoen. But the Giants are one of the most poorly run organizations, so it's not really surprising that they'd get Stephon Diggs. As for the Chiefs, they go on the road and get it done. Mahomes' first career road playoff game, and he looked like, well, Patrick Mahomes. Like I said, Pacheco was great. Kelsey was great. And yes, Jason Kelsey showed up with his shirt off and looked like an absolute man. But now Kansas City goes to the AFC Championship game where they'll take on the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar versus Mahomes. Those two defenses going at it, and two of the best coaches of the generation, and John Harbaugh and Andy Reid. To me, the difference is simple. Baltimore's run defense is really good. Kansas City wants to run the ball, and I think the Ravens find a way to stop it and force Mahomes to throw the ball to these receivers that can't catch. Yes, Marquez Valdes-Scantling caught 2 huge passes in that game, but he's going to be throwing it to him more than twice against Baltimore, and I just don't think they're going to execute. Give me the Ravens to beat the Chiefs in a classic, and it's Ravens-Niners, and the color theory continues. As for the Bills, it's a disappointing loss. Their expectations the last few years have been Super Bowl or bust, and Mahomes has ruined it 3 times now. I think you have to ask yourself, is Sean McDermott the right coach? The answer is no. The fake punt call was atrocious. They tried to get too cute, and the fact that they gave it to Damar Hamlin kind of tells me that Sean McDermott wanted Damar Hamlin to have his moment after he had his heart attack on Monday Night Football last year. They wanted him to have a great moment for the season because he couldn't really play, obviously due to the medical issue. But if that was the moment you were trying to have, that was the worst coaching decision I've seen in a long time. And that should honestly cost him his job. And if I'm the Pagula family, who are not great owners, I would absolutely call Bill Belichick and say, come coach the Bills. Get Josh Allen to a Super Bowl. We've seen you do it with Tom Brady. No, Josh Allen is not Tom Brady. But Josh Allen certainly has all the talent. He reminds me a lot of Cam Newton. Size and the ability to move with a very strong arm. Cam Newton's arm wasn't nearly this strong. Josh Allen can absolutely win a Super Bowl, but it wasn't all his fault yesterday. Yes, he made one crucial error, but Stephon Diggs dropped a huge pass. His coach didn't do him any favors either. At the end of the day, like I said, it was a team loss for the Bills. Kansas City is their kryptonite. So, that concludes the playoff portion. Let's talk about the coaches, the coaching carousel. So we know New England was open. They hired Gerard Mayo. It's like a B-plus hire. Okay, Gerard Mayo was in-house. He worked for Bill Belichick, played for Bill Belichick as a linebacker. He was the guy all along. I think people thought maybe Mike Vrabel would get this job, but Gerard Mayo, it was the easy pick for Robert Kraft. I think Robert Kraft wants to reestablish his power in this organization. He got rid of Brady, got rid of Belichick, 2 pretty big egos. Gerard Mayo is not a guy who's going to want personnel control. He just wants control of the locker room, which he'll have. He'll obviously have a say in who the quarterback is because he's the head coach, but at the end of the day, I think Kraft's going to be the one calling all the shots, and that's exactly what he wants. Then we go to the Tennessee Titans. Their job opened up after the firing of Mike Vrabel, which was very surprising. I mentioned in the last episode that, Tennessee's one of the most dysfunctional teams. So who's Tennessee going to hire? Well, it's not an attractive job. They don't have a quarterback. Yes, they have a high first-round pick, but their owner fired one of the best coaches in football, so clearly they don't know what they're doing. So my gut tells me it's probably going to be Dan Quinn, or they also interviewed Panthers offensive coordinator Thomas Brown and Bengals offensive coordinator Brian Callahan. For me, of those 3, I would hire Dan Quinn. The Bengals offensive coordinator, no disrespect, he has nothing to do with that offense. It's all Joe Burrow and all Zach Taylor. And the Panthers offensive coordinator, the Panthers were awful. How could you hire somebody? I get it, they can make impressions, but my God, I wouldn't hire that guy. I'd rather go without a coach if he was the guy I was going for. So for me, I would hire Dan Quinn if I'm Tennessee. I'm really surprised they haven't interviewed Bobby Slowick, but maybe that's because he was waiting till after Houston got eliminated. Maybe he'll get more involved in the coaching cycle now. He's the Texans offensive coordinator who helped develop C.J. Stroud. He's another guy who absolutely deserves an opportunity to coach, and we'll see how that situation plays itself out. As for the Raiders, they hired Antonio Pierce. It was the only move they really could make. Harbaugh was never going there. And Antonio Pierce was beloved by his players, by Max Crosby and Davante Adams. Those are two of the bigger names on their franchise, and Davante may not even be there next year. But the fact that he went 5-4 kind of tells me all you have to know. He had the locker room won over. So they got Antonio Pierce, and now Max Crosby will be a Raider for life. And we'll see how Antonio Pierce can handle it, but he still needs a quarterback at the end of the day because Aiden O'Connell is clearly not the answer. Now we get to the Chargers. This is the big one for me. It's clearly Jim Harbaugh's job if he wants it, but the longer this goes, the longer I believe Harbaugh goes back to Michigan. Harbaugh wants everything lined up for him perfectly. He wants total autonomy. He wants everything perfect. If it's not perfect, he's not going to the NFL. At the end of the day, I think he ultimately wants to stay at Michigan. He could become the next Nick Saban. Saban is no longer at Alabama. They hired Kalen DeBoer, who's not going to be the next Nick Saban. Jim Harbaugh could make Michigan Alabama Junior. I'm not going to say Alabama because that would be disrespectful. He'll be Alabama Junior. He could win 3 or 4 titles at Michigan and dominate for a long time. Yes, Ohio State will be there, and Oklahoma, Texas, and all these other schools. But Michigan just won a title. They're going to get some of the best recruits in the country, and Jim Harbaugh will find a way to get them there. To me, the only question is the sanctions. Is he willing to deal with that? If he is, it's a no-brainer. He's going back to Michigan. I think the big thing with the Chargers is they have to find the right GM for Harbaugh, and they need to clean up some of their roster. They're an aging team with a young quarterback. Keenan Allen gets hurt a lot, so does Mike Williams. Austin Eckler requested a trade in the summer but took it back, and their defense isn't getting younger. So the Chargers are in kind of a weird spot, but any coach is an upgrade over Brandon Staley. My prediction, Jim Harbaugh goes back to Michigan, and the Chargers end up hiring Mike Vrabel, who's much better than Brandon Staley. Now let's go to Washington. I believe Ben Johnson will be their head coach, as I've said before. He's the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions, who turned Jared Goff around. Ben Johnson absolutely deserves a job for what he's done with the Lions offense. How creative they've been, how powerful they've been with the run game. Washington has talent. McLaurin, Robinson, and Logan Thomas, they have talent. They have to fix their offensive line, and they've got to cut down on the turnovers, which they can do by adding a better quarterback than Sam Howell, and they'll probably do that in the draft with Drake May or someone else. But Ben Johnson will bring a level of accountability and a level of creativity to Washington's offense. If I'm an offensive player and they hire him, I would be thrilled, especially if I'm Terry McLaurin. I would be really happy because you're probably going to nearly break the receiving record. Because Jared Goff throws a ton. But Washington does want to establish the run game if under Ben Johnson, and I fully believe that Ben Johnson will be the coach. Then we get to the NFC South. So Carolina is probably the shittiest job in the league, right? No first-round pick. They traded it away to take Bryce Young. Bryce Young was a disaster this year. They have no offensive help. Their defense has some talent. J.C. Horn, Jeremy Chin, Brian Burns, Derek Thomas, they have talent. So to me, what makes sense here is bringing in a defensive coach. I would hire Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator for the Baltimore Ravens. The only thing I question with this hire would be, is he really the reason that defense is that good, or is it just the talent, right? You have Kyle Hamilton at safety, Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen. You have to wonder if he leaves Baltimore, is he really that good of a coach? We don't know. He's young, yes. He got the players to buy in, yes. But I feel like it's more John Harbaugh than it is Mike McDonald. And Carolina's an organization that really hasn't gotten it right since Cam Newton left. So I'm curious to see what they do, but my guess is they probably hire an inexperienced coach. Then we go to the Atlanta Falcons, a team that Bill Belichick has interviewed with twice, Jim Harbaugh has interviewed with twice. Let's face it, Belichick doesn't want the Falcons job. He's hoping and praying that one of these playoff teams fires the coach so he can step right in and do the job. Atlanta doesn't have a quarterback. It could be Justin Fields, it could be Kirk Cousins, but right now it's no one. Desmond Ridder was awful, Mariota was awful the year before, and Matt Ryan was at the end of his career. Atlanta hasn't had a good quarterback since Mike Vick. Yes, Matt Ryan in his prime, I'll give him his respect, but really Michael Vick was Atlanta. He was. And the Falcons, Justin Fields, he's a young quarterback. He's got a lot of talent. I think he got put into a really bad situation in Chicago. Their coaching staff wasn't very good, and that happens. And Justin Fields, by the way, committed to Georgia back in the day, and he's also from Georgia. So it would make sense to have Justin Fields on the Atlanta Falcons, kind of a hometown kid trying to find himself. I think it's a great fit, along with the weapons they have in Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts. To me, this is an offensive job. I get hiring Belichick because he brings stability, but Belichick has never done well with young quarterbacks. Even though Mac Jones made the playoffs once, he's been a disaster ever since. To me, this screams a non-defensive coach. Belichick shouldn't want this. Harbaugh shouldn't want this. Mike Vrabel shouldn't want this. To me, this should be an offensive coach. Bobby Slowick would be a great hire if he interviews there. But like I said, if Belichick really is that persistent on coaching, this might be his only job. Because honestly, I think if I were him, I'd go into television with Nick Saban, do like a coach's film room or something with the Manning brothers, and then come back next year when Buffalo, Philly, and Dallas could all open up. Next year's coaching carousel could really blow wide open next year. You look at teams like the Bills, the Eagles and the Cowboys, the Giants and the Jets could open as well. There are absolutely going to be some good openings next year, and this year there just aren't that many. To me, the two that really stand out are the Chargers and the Seahawks. And that's where we go to next. Seattle has talent on their team. Metcalf, Lockett, Kenneth Walker. Geno Smith at quarterback is not an awful option, but it's not a great option. Their defense struggled this year. Statistically, if you look at the numbers, Seattle should have been awful, and Pete Carroll did an unbelievable job. But this decision was made by the ownership group, according to Pete Carroll. And at this point, they probably want somebody younger, and if Pete Carroll claims he's a defensive coach, their defense was not good this year. So to me, this is Dan Quinn's job. I know he's being interviewed at Tennessee, and I think the Titans want to make a move on him before Seattle does. Because to me, the Dan Quinn-Mike Vrabel situation is fascinating. One of them, they'll probably both get head coaching jobs, but they're both interviewing at the same places. Except Tennessee, of course, for Mike Vrabel because he was just fired there. To me, Dan Quinn ends up in either Tennessee or Seattle, and Mike Vrabel ends up in either Seattle or LA. If Mike Vrabel goes without a coaching job, that's a disservice to the NFL. They don't know what they're doing. And most owners, for the record, don't have a clue what they're doing. That's why they hire outside firms and other people. I mean, Washington hired Bob Myers from the Golden State Warriors, who brought in Steve Kerr to win 4 championships. But I can guarantee you the reason they hired him is because they want to be the next Golden State Warriors. That's not happening. Okay, I don't care if they get Drake May, Caleb Williams, or Tom Brady. They're not winning 4 Super Bowls. So, the NFL coaching carousel is at its bit. I've never seen this many great coaches in a carousel. But I think what you need to do when you look at coaches in the NFL is you need to look at offensive coordinators that have either changed quarterbacks' careers or helped them develop to an elite level, and defensive coaches that have made defenses better than what they are, and not just because of their talent. See, to me, the Jets and even the Giants to some degree are just slow. Like, the Jets should fire Robert Saleh. Go hire Mike Vrabel. You want a defensive guy? Mike Vrabel's better than Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh, the only thing he's good at is shaving his head and, cheering like an 8-year-old on the sideline. He's done nothing. I know he hasn't had a quarterback. Zach Wilson is awful. Trevor Siemian and whatever, Tim Boyle don't even belong in the NFL. I get it. Now he's going to get Aaron Rodgers, who's going to make a weekly appearance on Pat McAfee's show every week. Great. We get to listen to him talk about Dr. Fauci for another 5 years. Can't wait. You know, the bottom line is the Jets are not going to win a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers. They're not going to. Jet fans need to get over this. This is not going to happen. They're going to end up firing Saleh, Douglas. Rodgers will retire. Hackett will get cleaned out, and they're going to start all over. Because that's all they know how to do is start all over. As for the Giants, they have their own internal issues. Brian Daboll's got anger management problems, according to Pat Leonard of the Daily News. And he's going to anger management class. Wink Martindale's out as DC. Giant fans were hopeful to get Antonio Pierce. That's not happening. I don't know who the Giants are going to hire at DC. I'm sure they'll make a good hire. But they got to figure out their quarterback situation. They paid Daniel Jones a lot of money. He got hurt. I don't even think he's that good. I don't think they're going to take a quarterback with their top pick. They're likely going to go receiver. Malik Neighbors is a name to keep an eye on at LSU. Maybe they go O-line. But, the Jets, they'll probably make the playoffs, lose in the second round. Giants, they probably won't even make the playoffs. And it's just same old story. New York is dysfunctional. So, I'll throw in a little NBA here. The New York Knicks played the Toronto Raptors the other night. It was the first time since R.J. Barrett and Emmanuel Quickley were traded for OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, and Malachi Flynn. Now, in terms of the trade, I loved it for the Knicks. Okay, OG Anunoby is a perfect fit next to Brunson and Randall, 3-and-D wing, stretch, really long, athletic, and you need those guys to stop superstars like Giannis and others. RJ Barrett's a scorer. The Knicks had two ball-dominant players in Brunson and Randall, and Barrett just wasn't a great fit. Emmanuel Quickley wanted to be a lead guard. It wasn't going to happen in New York as long as Brunson was here. They were both homegrown talents, and it's hard to see homegrown talents go. That's what I said about the Bears with Justin Fields. Stop falling in love with him. You're taking Caleb Williams. The Knicks, I think, fans, I think, were a little bit edgy about it because RJ and Quickley were two homegrown kids, and you fall in love with those players. But if you're not winning a championship with them, you might as well let them go. Quickley was going to want $120 million, and RJ Barrett was overpaid, and he's just a scorer. He's not a good defender, not a great passer, and Quickley kind of prances around too much for my liking. He'd probably get clotheslined by somebody who got pissed off. I love the trade now for the Knicks. They're 9-2 since the trade. The Raptors are 4-7. Now, Toronto's going in a rebuild. They just traded Pascal Siakam to Indiana. So the Raptors are going to lose a lot of games. They're going to be out of it. They're going to be in the lottery, and they're going to have a high draft pick this year. As for the Knicks, their goal is to make the Eastern Conference Finals. Remember, last year they lost in Game 6 in the second round to Miami. We know the pressure's on Julius Randle to figure it out. But the Knicks still need another guard to replace Quickley. Maybe that's DeJounte Murray. Maybe it's Jordan Clarkson. Don't count on Donovan Mitchell. He's not coming to New York. The Knicks are not paying 3 first-round picks for a guy who couldn't win in Utah and Cleveland. Okay? They're not getting Donovan Mitchell. If they do, it'll be at their price, not Cleveland's. I think the Knicks are more likely to just add a small piece, a sixth man that can score. Jordan Clarkson makes a ton of sense. He played with Julius Randle in L.A. DeJounte Murray makes sense. He's a long athletic guard who can defend at a high level. Had some great coaching from Quinn Snyder and Greg Popovich from the same coaching tree. So they both make sense. The best the Knicks can make an offer right now is Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, and 1 or 2 draft picks. Evan Fournier's on an expiring deal. No one's going to take him after this year. Quentin Grimes wants more playing time, but when you play as poor as he has over the last 2 months, no one's going to want you. If you look at the reports of the teams interested, they're all rebuilding teams because no competitive team is going to give that guy major minutes. He's averaging less than 10 points a game, and he shoots the ball too fast. And he's kind of a tweener. He's not a good enough shooter to be a 2, and he's an undersized 3. So for those of you expecting a major move from the Knicks, don't count on it. This is going to be their team. Remember, Mitchell Robinson is expected back from an ankle injury here in the near future. And you have to hope that Josh Hart and DiVincenzo continue to play the way they have been. Tom Thibodeau's contract's up at the end of the year, and the Knicks should absolutely give him an extension for what he's done. And I'm sure they will. And in the offseason, they'll have to figure out, and hopefully a disgruntled superstar at an elite level like Joel Embiid or Luka Doncic asks for a trade. That's about the only reason the Knicks are keeping their draft picks around is for somebody of that talent. As for the Raptors, like I said, they're in a major rebuild. They're hoping Emmanuel Quickley can become a lead guard and RJ Barrett can find a change of scenery that can really help him here at home in Toronto. The Raptors are in a rebuild and they will be for a while. I don't think Emmanuel quickly will become a lead guard. He's got a great opportunity, but right now it hasn't worked out. He's averaging 18 a game, but that's not great for a lead guard. RJ Barrett's going to be 20 points a game, probably 6 or 7 rebounds and like 2 assists. That's what he is. They were really great in New York for the fans. They loved them. I personally wouldn't have given them a standing ovation like they did, but New York fans haven't had anything to stand for since the 94 Stanley Cup. So, who are we kidding? So yeah, that's my take on the Knicks. They're a good team. Can they make the conference finals? Absolutely. Milwaukee, they just don't defend at a high level. Philadelphia doesn't have anything around Embiid and Maxey. Indiana can only score, they can't defend. Orlando's too young. Miami's dangerous, but I have to see them do something at the deadline. Their point guard situation's a little murky right now with Kyle Lowry. Most people are picking Boston and Philly because of Embiid and Tatum, and of course, media outlets are going to want that because of the matchup. But at the end of the day, the Knicks and Miami are built similarly, built on toughness and defensive culture. And Miami's been in the finals twice in the last 5 years. I would expect the Knicks to be very competitive. I think the Knicks get to the conference finals, but ultimately come up short to Boston because of the talent level that they have. Now, I'll throw in a little hockey and then we'll wrap up. This is a lot short. Like I said, the last episode was ridiculously long. It was way too long. Again, this is for all my New York fans. The New York Rangers, they last night came back from a 2-0 deficit and defeated the Anaheim Ducks 5-2. I know Ranger fans were having meltdowns left and right. Look, the Rangers are still winning their division. We're in January. Just be thankful that they're losing this much in January and not in April. Because if this was April, the whole world would be falling off in New York. And I said it to someone last night, and I'll say it here. If you win in New York, you're a god, and if you lose in New York, they want you out. It's ruthless expectations in New York. Fans are very unrealistic here. If you go back to the beginning of the year for the Rangers, realistically, I thought the Rangers, if they got to the second round, that was a great season for them. Because last year they embarrassed themselves to the Devils in the first round. If they get to the second round, that's a good year. Now, are they the most talented team in their division? Yes. But based off last year, I would absolutely take the second round. Now, since they were leading the President's Cup at one point, I think it's pretty much conference finals or bust. The Metro Division is down this year. Washington and Pittsburgh have not been very good. The Islanders got creative in hiring Patrick Waugh after firing Lane Lambert. We'll see how that does. I think in the short term, the Isles will figure it out, but long term, they don't have enough offensive capability. We knew Columbus was going to be bad, and Philadelphia has shocked the world by being this team that everyone thought was going to be bad, and now all of a sudden they're second in the division. We knew Carolina would be there, but they don't have enough offensive capability. I still think the Rangers get to the conference finals. Shesterkin will find his game. He has struggled a little bit recently, but I think a lot of it is mental. Once he gets in a groove, he'll figure it out. Defensively, their group is what it is. Ryan Lindgren is a tough-nosed D who's going to get hurt. Keandre Miller has underachieved as the 16th overall pick, but maybe in the playoffs things will be different. Braden Schneider's a defensive D-man with an offensive D partner in Gustafsson, who's been a nice add for them this year. Trouba's an overpaid second-pair D who brings toughness to the locker room, and he's probably worth every penny, even though he's overpaid. And Fox, we know his capability offensively, but I'm not convinced he's 100% healthy at this time. To me, the bigger problem is up front. Their depth has struggled all year to score. Goudreau, Benino, and Pitlick are three of the most unproductive players I've ever seen in a Ranger uniform to this point. Yes, they do a lot of the heart and soul things. They block shots, they win faceoffs, they lay a hit or two. But they don't shoot, they can't score, and they can't make a play to save their life. Jimmy Vesey has been a nice surprise for them over the last 2 years, and Will Cooley came out of training camp and has really made a major impact. Most teams would take 12 of Will Cooley over 12 of Tyler Pitlick. Here's a newsflash. Yes, the Rangers' depth took a toll when Philip Hedl had concussion-like symptoms and has missed a lot of time. Capo Caco had a pretty serious knee injury, and I'm surprised he came back this early. But sometimes the Rangers rush things, and teams, I'm not saying the Rangers did, but it looks like they might have. And the reason is because Chris Drury knows his job's on the line. Chris Drury knows that if they don't get as far as Jim Dolan wants them to, he could be out of a job. We know they have talent. Okay, we know Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad, and Trocheck. Congrats to making your second All-Star game. And we know they have Shesterkin and Fox. We know they rely a ton on their superstar talent. But the problem is the depth, and the problem is money. Filip Chytil is expected to come back and play. He took some time off to go back home to the Czech Republic and kind of reset himself, and things have progressed really well. But I have to wonder if the Rangers played a major part in this disaster that happened with Chytil. Was it that toxic that they sent him home? They felt like sending him home could reset him? Because that really shouldn't have had to happen. He should have stayed in New York, been away from the team, maybe be with the trainers, and that's about it. Maybe he felt a little bit isolated, a little bit depressed, so he went home to family and friends, and all of a sudden he found it. But now he has to come back, and you're throwing him into a major playoff run, and people are going to expect him to be Filip Chytil. That's not going to happen. The guy is more likely to get hurt than he is to score 20 goals. So Chris Drury is going to have to make some decisions. What do you do at that position? Yes, Chytil will play, but you can't count on him. You only have so much money. You probably need to add a depth defense because no one's going to rely on Zach Jones. And you probably need two forwards, one to play in the top six and one to play in the bottom six. But I don't know if they have the money or the creativity to figure this out. They may only acquire two pieces, a D-man and a forward, and hope that one of Wheeler or Kakko figures it out the rest of the way. Wheeler right now is playing like a third liner and Kakko is playing like a fourth liner. That's the reality of the situation. If you look at the wing position like I did last night on NHL.com, if you look at the production, Panarin and Kreider are clearly their two best wings. Lafreniere is clearly their third best wing. Right? So your top line really, in my opinion, is Panarin, Zibanejad, and Lafreniere. Yes, Trocheck has played well, but at the end of the day, you paid Zibanejad to be the number one guy. Yes, he hasn't performed well. He's DJing and taking care of his kid. But he's going to have to refocus, or the Rangers might have to seriously consider major changes this offseason if it disappoints again. And it's not going to be the coach. The coach can only do so much. The players have to execute. To me, the top line is Panarin, Zibanejad, Lafreniere. The second line would be Kreider, Trocheck, and Wheeler. Yes, Blake Wheeler's been a disappointment, but he's a top six talent with third line speed. That's what he is. Yes, he's slow. But at the end of the day, he's played with Kreider a ton. And he's pretty good friends with Trocheck from what I understand. So if that's the case, put kind of a big boy line together and let's see what happens. On the third line, I would have Chytil, Cooley, and Vesey. Vesey's been really good, and Cooley's been really good. Chytil at least would have some defensive responsibility around him to take the pressure off him. The key then would be for him just to focus on the offensive end and win some faceoffs. And then the fourth line for me, this is a tough one, but I'd probably go Kakko, Gaudreau, and Bonino with Pitlick sitting. Now, they're more likely to acquire someone at the deadline, a Sean Monahan and Anthony Duclair, and once they do that, Tyler Pitlick will go the other way as part of the cap hit. Right? So let's just say, for example, they take Sean Monahan from the Montreal Canadiens. Jeff Gordon and Chris Drury have a relationship, Jeff Gordon being the former Rangers GM. Let's say it's Monahan for Pitlick and a second. I'm just making this up. Right? So Sean Monahan comes in. He plays on the Zibanejad. Let's say he plays with Trocheck and Kreider. Wheeler drops to the third line with Cooley and Chytil. And then the fourth line is Vesey, Gaudreau, and Kakko. All of a sudden, your team's a lot better. And if Chytil doesn't work out at center, you could put Monahan there and put Chytil on the wing. Remember, Chytil's played wing before and played well there. So you have that flexibility. To me, Monahan's a better fit than Duclair. He could play both center and wing. Duclair is straight up a wing, especially on the right side, which the Rangers have had issues with this year. But the way it's going right now, Kakko is a failed experiment. He was a second overall pick that's basically a bottom six forward at this point. Yes, he's had injuries and COVID and all of that, but at the end of the day, the excuses start to wear thin. You were the second overall pick, you were the consensus second overall pick, and you've been a disaster. He is an RFA after this year, and I think the Rangers will probably end up re-signing him to a one-year, $2.5 million deal. Why? Because you can't trade him on his own. He has zero value around the league. No one's going to want him. So he either becomes a part of a bigger deal, not for Steven Stamkos, not for Patrick Kane, not for Jonathan Toews and Patrice Bergeron, and even those guys are free agents. Not for Sidney Crosby. This is not NHL 23, the video game. We have a salary cap. We live in that kind of world. The Rangers are not going to be acquiring an all-star team. It's not happening. Get over yourself. The reality is simple. They need to acquire one forward that can play center and wing. I think Monahan's a great fit. And then they can acquire a depth defenseman and push Zach Jones to the 8th D spot so they don't have to play him. Because let's face it, Zach Jones is probably going to get traded at some point here in the next 6 to 8 months. He won't be a Ranger. He wants to play. He's a third pair defenseman on a second power play unit that is awful in his own end. Ultimately, like I said, I think the Rangers could potentially go all the way, but they need their goalie to play better, and they need to make a couple of additions. I would be a little bit scared of the Islanders right now. Patrick Waugh is a different type of animal. He's a coach that's a yeller and a screamer. Lane Lambert was more of a quiet guy who tried to play fast with slow personnel. We'll see if Patrick Waugh can get the Islanders to the playoffs. They're not that far out. The East is kind of bunched from about 7 to 12. It's pretty bunched. I don't think the Islanders will finish in the top 3. I do think Philadelphia could fall off, though, and there's a chance it could happen. The Islanders could finish in 3rd. The Devils are kind of interesting because they don't have a goalie, but they have a ton of injuries, and I don't know how they're going to overcome all of it. But, last night after watching the Rangers, they struggled in the first period, down 2-0 to a team that's won like 10 games. And then they got it together, and they ended up surviving, and they play San Jose tomorrow, a team that's the worst team in the league, and they need to dominate that game. Yes, the playoffs are about Zibanejad and Panarin, but to me, I actually think both of those guys show up. To me, it's about the depth. Can they get production out of their depth? We know Goudreau can't produce. We know Bonino can't produce. We know Pitlick can't produce if he's here. So now you're relying on Hedl, Cooley, Vesey, and Kakko to figure it out. We'll see. I still think there's a great chance they can win the Cup. I wouldn't put my money on them, but the Eastern Conference is kind of in a weird spot. The NHL really is in a weird spot this year. It's kind of been almost like a down year for the league. Edmonton has won 13 in a row. I mean, Colorado's had a weird year. They had 2 guys going to the mental assistance program. I don't know what's going on there. I still think Dallas could be a favorite to win it in the West just because of their goalie and what they have. I think if they add a defenseman, they're set. Pete DeBoer's a great coach. He's taken, I think, 2 different franchises to a Stanley Cup final. So I could very easily see it being Rangers and Dallas. And remember, Rangers and Dallas have had some competitive games over the years. And remember, they traded Nils Lundqvist to the Dallas Stars. Remember, Rangers played Dallas at the Garden. I don't know if this is this. I think it was last year when Keandre Miller scored a crazy goal at the end of regulation, and then Fox won it in overtime. To me, the Rangers absolutely have everything in place. They have a great coach, great goaltender, number 1 D, number 1 center, pretty decent wing play, but it comes down to the depth. They need those guys to step up, and if they can do it, they can absolutely win it. I'm glad they're losing in January, not in April, and Rangers Twitter has to calm down. This is January. This is not April, May, and June. If they get to the second round, it's a good year for the Rangers. See, the problem with New York fans is once their team gets in the playoffs, if you don't win, they want everybody traded. If they lose in the second round to, say, Carolina, they're going to want Panarin, Zibanejad traded. They're going to want Shesterkin gone. It's going to be some crazy shit on Twitter because that's the way it goes. People are unrealistic. Okay? You wouldn't be getting to the playoffs if it wasn't for Artemi Panarin. If you didn't have Panarin, I'm not even sure you'd be a playoff team right now. So I think Panarin will be fine. I think Zibanejad, he'll come along. I think the All-Star Game break is going to help this team kind of reset themselves. They've had a little bit of a rough patch here the last 11 games. I think they're 4-6-1. So they need to just, take a few days. Trocheck and Shesterkin will represent them in the All-Star Game. That All-Star Games are breathers, too. You have to remember, most people don't care about the All-Star Game. Nobody watches it. No one watches a lot of this stuff because guys aren't trying. And they shouldn't have to try because they don't want to get hurt. Because at the end of the day, it's not about the All-Star Game. It's about winning a cup. That's when they're going to take a beating. So the All-Star Game is basically a week to recover and rest and ramp up for basically 4 to 5, 6 months of hell. And I think the Rangers absolutely can go on a run. Laviolette's done a pretty decent job in year 1. I wish he would change the lines a little bit more, but that's being picky. Like I said, Blake Wheeler was a low-risk, high-reward signing. He's a third-line player. That's what he is. He's a third-line player at speed. He's got second-line talent, but he's just kind of a misfit. Kakko's a bust as a draft pick. He's probably a bottom 6 player at best. Lafreniere's a middle six winger. To me, the Rangers don't have an elite right wing, and you're not going to find that at the deadline. That's more of an offseason move. They don't really have that. I know people will say, well, you should go get Tarasenko or Kane. Tarasenko's past his prime, and Kane just had hip surgery. I'm not taking chances on those guys. They need a long-term right wing because they gave up Buchnevich for pretty much nothing. So they're going to have to figure that out in the offseason. They're going to have to figure out the center ice position with Hedl. Fourth line center is easy to fill. They just go out and sign somebody, or maybe maybe Adam Emstrom will take the opportunity as a young kid and take it. They'll get rid of Goudreau, I'm sure. Gustafsson might be a tough re-sign, so you have to wonder if Matthew Robertson comes in next year and kind of takes the spot. But we'll see. But Ranger fans need to calm down. It's okay. It's January 22nd, not April 22nd. Okay? The Rangers played over their heads. No one expected them to be a President's Trophy contender. Most people had them in third place in the division behind Carolina and New Jersey. So I think everybody knows the Rangers have the star end talent. It's about the depth. I'll say it. It's about the depth. And until they can figure that out, they're not winning. Now, if they lose in the first round again, my guess is Chris Drury's out of a job. Laviolette will stay. The Rangers will have to consider some major core decisions. I still don't think they're going to make major decisions. They're not going to trade Zibanejad or Panarin. I think all those guys are here. It's more about what do you do with Kakko? What do you do with... Goudreau's going to be gone anyway. I think most of this team is probably here next year. It's probably, the only guys who are leaving are Wheeler, potentially Kakko, Goudreau, Bonino, Pitlick. You figure Othman probably comes on the team next year. Maybe you lose Gustafsson on the back end. Lindgren's a UFA, but I think the Rangers are going to try to find a way to bring him back. But overall, to me, their issue is their depth up front. They need more production. Their left side D is interesting to discuss, but I'm willing to wait and see how that plays out because I still think in order for the Rangers to win a cup, Keandre Miller has to play with Adam Fox, put Lindgren with Trouba, put Gustafsson with Schneider, and try that for 10 games, and let's see what happens. You have a shutdown D pair right there. Keandre Miller can focus more defensively. Fox can do his thing on offense, just like Schneider does with Gustafsson. Right? Gustafsson's the offense, Schneider's the defense. And I always say on a line, you always want a playmaker, a shooter, and a net front. Right? Zibanejad and Panarin are both playmakers and shooters. Lafreniere can be your net front. Kreider's your net front. Wheeler's your playmaker. Trocheck then could potentially become a shooter for you, which is not necessarily a bad thing. On the third line, you have Cooley in front. Hedl's a playmaker. VZ becomes a shooter. Fourth line's the fourth line. They dump the puck. They get it up top. They sit on the bench. That's about it. So that's a show. Unfortunately, it was the same length as the last one. I didn't expect to go on a rant like that with the Rangers for that long. But anyway, I don't know when the next episode will be posted again. Social life, work, full-time job. It takes up a lot of my time, so I appreciate you all listening. Like and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with everybody. I appreciate it. Again, I'm not expecting to blow up here and get 100,000 views. I appreciate you all listening, and take care and have a good night.